Well, hello there, you beautiful creatures. I know, been gone a long time. Hopefully, I will be able to follow my New Year's resolution to put out consistent content going into 2024, and I very much appreciate you coming back, or if this is your first time checking out one of my videos, welcome. Would sure love it if you subscribed and hit that like button, but mostly just watch my content, stick around, hope you really like it. I figured that I would check in with you all today around the holidays, this very cheerful time of year, to talk about a very important topic and a character that is very close to my heart. I was shocked that I didn't see any video essays prior to this. I didn't want to step on anyone's toes, but I want to talk about Mort from Bob's Burgers. Yes, I want to talk about Mort the Mortician. And yes, I feel like that really punny joke should be insulting with how simplified it is, but I actually kinda love it. Now, I know that anyone who is watching a video essay about cartoon pop culture probably loves Bob's Burgers. I haven't met anyone so far that said they hate Bob's Burgers, but, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion. Sorry about that. Anyway, so I wanted to, again, talk about Mort in this video and how he is a severely underappreciated character, and I think that that is appropriate because he symbolizes a conversation that in today's society is extremely difficult to have, and everyone avoids it to the point where it just becomes this huge systemic issue, and that's talking about death. It's talking about grief and talking about the very costly industry of death care.
Corpse delivery for a lonely morgue owner. That would be me.
I think the moment that really sealed the deal for me that Mort was my favorite character was in season 12, episode 11, where a lot of it focuses on families having a conversation about death, what happens to our belongings, and just really taking into account what happens to our remains after we pass away. And I feel like this episode handled it in a really sweet and sentimental way. And here's a little clip of, a mashup of clips from that episode. And it really just speaks to my heart because I am kind of an armchair death care activist. I will talk about it with anyone that I know, friends, family, coworkers, because it is a really important conversation to have. If you don't prepare for your passing or the passing of your loved ones or even your friends, it has huge repercussions, whether it is emotional or financial.
Decaf coffee, please, Linda. Better make it a double.
Something the matter, Mort?
There was a big brouhaha at the mortuary. A guy died without a will, and at the funeral, a big fight broke out over who gets his autographed picture of Patrick Swayze.
Oh, no, that's terrible to die without a will. It's not even that great to die with one.
Right, yeah? I've been planning my funeral ever since I was a kid, arranging grieving Playmobil figures on the floor in rows.
Oh, we don't have a will or any of that dying stuff.
What?
But we've just been too busy or tired. All the time tired.
But you haven't done anything? Not even the basic?
Here, Lynn, look. A nice, grassy double plot on a hill, under an oak tree. It's like a pretty picnic spot. It's just us having a forever picnic.
Yeah, Bob, here's my problem. Worms. They're the ones having the picnic. You gotta bring flowers, you gotta keep your voice down, you gotta dress up. Does that sound like our kids? Ash scattering at sea. Oh, by airplane. It's like skywriting, only instead of smoke, it's you. I think we're just not gonna figure it out today. So we're back to plan B. Don't get hit by a bus.
No pressure, but here are some prices if you want to lock in now and beat inflation.
Oh my God.
That's for two? We're not buying the whole row.
Forget it. We'll never afford that.
Now, I know the end of this episode, on the surface, is another hilarious poke at Bob and Lynn. Oh, ha, 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 they're poor. And it's just supposed to be kind of a throwaway joke that they have this whole serious conversation about death care and what they would want to happen to their remains. But it actually is kind of a morbid topic because a lot of families are scraping by financially. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So without families having this conversation about grief management, not having a conversation about what they want to happen to their remains. If someone did pass away unexpectedly, like a car accident or some sort of public emergency, then families are left there in pieces emotionally, trying to figure out what's going on and how to handle this. Mostly people will see that their loved ones will be taken away to a hospital or a morgue or a coroner's office, and then they'll just be told, okay, well, we primarily work with this funeral home, such and such funeral home, usually owned by a massive corporation, and they think that, well, that's all that I can do. I'm stuck with my loved one's remains here, and that's all that I can do. I have no choice. But you do. But that's a whole nother conversation. I don't want to get into the brunt of that. I would highly recommend that you would go to these channels that I'm going to show on screen. There is Caitlin Doty, aka Ask a Mortician. I would highly recommend checking out her channel. You can also look into Laur the Mortician, who is on Instagram and TikTok, and they have a lot more insight. Speaking of how much of a great person that Mort is, and people really don't pay enough attention to how much of a nice person that Mort is, we go to Weekend at Mort's, which I think is fast becoming one of my top 5 episodes of Bob's Burgers, the more that I go back and rewatch this series. When they are impacted once again by the food inspector or the health inspector, Hugo, you're not important enough to remember, my guy. You are definitely salty as heck because you lost Linda. You need to go to therapy for that. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting really upset about a fictional character, but I'm doing a video essay on a cartoon. I think that I am supposed to. But we see that the restaurant is once again being impacted by some sort of inspection failure. There is mold that is in the walls, and they need to shut down the restaurant for 2 days to get it cleaned out. They planned on going to a hotel, but instead, Mort offers for them to stay at his place.
Urn. Another urn. That's an award I won for best urn. Okay, kids, don't climb on anything. Don't touch anything.
Do you think he's gonna have skulls?
What do you think he eats soup out of?
Hey, do you think he's gonna have a drawer full of gum that he takes out of corpse pockets? Because if he does, I want some.
Here we go.
Hey, I'm not horrified at all.
This has been a very typical thing historically for small family-owned funeral homes because they are big buildings. Usually the basement will be kind of like a processing area where they do embalming or preparing or cremating, and then the main floor is for wakes to, present the body, do a viewing, and then the top floor will end up being living quarters. That's where they live, because you have to think when the coroner or anyone is bringing them a body, they're probably bringing them people's remains at all hours because accidents don't stick to a 9 to 5 schedule, so it just makes sense. When the family comes to Mort's to stay over, at first there's a lot of apprehension. And even when they come in and you finally get the grand reveal of Mort's place and how nice it is, they admit that they were coming in with an unconscious bias, thinking that it was going to be creepy and full of dead bodies, purely because of Mort's line of work and the fact that he lived in his funeral home, which quite a lot of people do. If you remember the movie My Girl, which, how can you not remember My Girl?
And where is his glasses? He can't see without his glasses. Put his glasses on.
The other parts of this episode that are cool is that Mort is so passionate about what he does, he's showing the family his trophies from competitions that he's won for urns, so I'm guessing that he makes his own urns instead of ordering them or something. I don't know. I would have to look into if there's I'm sure that there are trade shows for the death care industry, and maybe if he has a crematorium, he has a kiln, maybe he's making his own urns, I don't know. But I think that that's fascinating, that he has such a pride in what he does, that he's showing the family, here are my trophies, and then he's showing the kids later on how to clean out, it looks like embalming tubes or something, which I don't know how legal it is to do that. I don't know. But it's a cartoon, so you can't really look that far into it. But it's just great that he's making these kids comfortable with being in this environment and helping him out with a task that, you know, those tubes probably have some pretty gross things in them. And the largest plot point in this episode is Mort going on a blind date with someone that he met on a dating app for people who work in the death care industry. And they have a great chemistry, and they are talking about things that only one mortician would be able to discuss with another. And you can tell that they really love their jobs, and they are not depressed. They are not drinking themselves to death, no pun intended. They are having a delightful, lively conversation, enjoying what they do for a living. Even though, again, we see this stigma is very prevalent, where Bob is sitting across the table and saying to Lynn, hey, take a drink or take a sip every time that they say something weird.
Every time they say something horrible, take a drink.
Bob, stop!
Because, again, it's this expectation of, hey, these people work in the death industry, so they've gotta be ghouls, right? I would love to know what happened to the two of them, and I really hope that they made it, but I don't believe we've seen her again. I am doing a complete rewatch of Bob's Burgers from the start, so I will have to go back and revisit to see if anything went anywhere with this cute little relationship, but I'm guessing that it was probably a one-time thing. I think at the end of the episode, where they are about to waka waka, you know, when the kids are going to leave the room and then they come across the dead body and they're kind of traumatized from it. I think that probably killed the moment, and I don't know. I don't think that it happened for them, but it would be cute to see that relationship revisited, even though I know it was a very niche plot point from season 1. But getting to my roundabout point, I think why I like Mort so much, other than the fact that the existence of his character brings about this conversation, talking about grief, what we leave behind, death care, and how we will take care of our remains, really is this stigma of the death care industry and about avoiding that conversation. We see it in the very first episode of Bob's Burgers. Now, in season 1, episode 1, we see that Bob has this turmoil with the health inspector because there is a rumor that there is human remains from the crematorium next door, and that those human remains are in his burgers, and it becomes an entire controversy that nearly shuts down his restaurant.
Human flesh?
Wait. This is one of our biggest weekends. You can't put that up. Nobody will eat here.
Prominently displayed.
Well, then just do your test, pal, because it's beef.
What is interesting to me is that on the surface, you would look at this and say, oh, this is a controversy that really only affects Bob in this case. But honestly, this is really bad for Mort as well. This is bad for his funeral home. It looks like it is a funeral home, mortuary, crematorium. I mean, this guy's a jack of all trades. He takes a lot of pride in his work. This also affects him, because this rumor is just as bad for him, because what is he doing wrong that human remains are getting into the burgers next door? Does this mean that there's some kind of dark relationship that him and Bob share where he's giving him human remains? Is a vent pouring into Bob's Burgers and going into the burgers? There's a lot of different implications that are bad for both of them. Yet, we see Mort orders a to-go burger from Bob's Burgers and has Gene bring it over so that he can eat it. When we see Mort ordering this to-go burger from Bob's Burgers and eating it in secret, it's kind of this nice kindred spirit deal where this whole rumor that was started by Luis in class that affects both of their businesses in a very negative light, he still wants to support Bob because he knows that either way, it's very likely that Mort is going to bounce back from this. He knows that ultimately he will be able to prove there are no human remains in the burgers and people will still come to him for business because a lot of funeral homes work off of family referrals, friend referrals, and he probably has some sort of relationship with people at the local hospital or the local coroner's office where they will, basically bring the corpses to him. So it won't hurt him in the long run, but he realizes that Bob's always having issues, keeping people coming to Bob's Burgers. So I just thought it was lovely that he still gave him patronage, even though this rumor and his child is part of what caused this whole controversy to begin with. There are a lot more moments with Mort that I would love to bring up, but I don't want this to be an incredibly long video, but it's worthwhile to kind of look at this through a new lens with these adult animated shows or, these animated shows that aim at people of all ages, because of course I am falling down the Daria rabbit hole, and the episode, The Misery Chick, everybody has talked about that episode. It is a great episode, don't get me wrong, because it does touch on the subject of grief and how we deal with death and how all aspects of it are normal. You have Daria, who is very realistic about it. She probably is more comfortable with the concept of death and dying and grief than anybody because she is a very well-studied student of literature. So for her, it was no big deal because she can realize in her head that Tommy Sherman was not anyone who was close to her. Tommy Sherman certainly was not anyone that she held in high regard because he was a jerk. So for her, there was nothing to mourn. It was certainly a very eye-opening moment, but she didn't need to talk to anyone about it because it didn't impact her. But then you have all these other people who are within her small community, within her school, and they don't think about those things in the same way that she does. So everybody dealt with it in a different way. You have Kevin, who was very upset, and I didn't care for the fact of how everybody shamed him for how he was grieving Tommy Sherman, because real men do cry, and I just hated that Ms. Lee, or Principal Lee, was being very gross about the way that he was verbally grieving Tommy's loss. But I have a whole other video coming up in the future talking about what a black hole of society Ms. Lee is, but don't worry, that's coming in the future. But everybody was grieving in a different way, and it was really lovely to have this episode as a benchmark to see that. And of course, there are, very many other cartoons that deal with the aspect of death and dying and grief. But what I love about Mort in Bob's Burgers is that we really have a highlight on someone who works in this industry, and we get to have these realistic conversations. Oh, and while I'm thinking about it, Gravity Falls. If we look at Robbie's parents, they work in the funeral industry. They run a funeral home. They're completely normal, happy, well-adjusted people. So there you go. There's another example right there. Even though we don't really go into their backstory much, we will all pass away someday. We need to have those conversations about what our final wishes are with our remains, where our stuff goes, who do our children go to, or our pets, or our massive Funko collections. What happens when we're all gone? And I would just love for you all to kind of contemplate that. Leave in the comments what your last wishes are with your remains, or what kind of funeral or memorial that you would want for yourself, or if that is, too much of, dark of a topic that you want to consider right now, especially with the holidays around the corner. Talk about what your favorite Bob's Burgers moments are. I would just love to hear from you in the comments. With that, I wish you a very happy holiday season. Happy Hanukkah, even though it passed. Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Yule, all the things. Happy New Year. Hope 2024 is less sucky for you than 2023 was, and I'll catch you next time.